The night sky above Earth seemed peaceful, but deep in the far reaches of space, danger was unfolding. A strange signal began to pulse through the vast expanse of the galaxy. It wasn't the usual noise of space. This was a clear, deliberate message. At first, the signal was too scrambled for anyone to understand, but as Earth's most advanced ships and tech scrambled to decode it, the message became clear, and it was chilling. You are not welcome. We are purging the stars. It was a threat from the Zalvaron Empire, a species that had swept through galaxy after galaxy, conquering and destroying. The Zalvaron believed in a single vision, order through total control. They created soldiers, from their own biology, mixing flesh with machines, making them nearly unstoppable. Whole planets had fallen to their forces, their people either wiped out or enslaved. Humanity had only just begun to join the Galactic Council, barely a blip, on the radar of the vast alien universe. Earth wasn't ready for the Zalvaron, but it had no choice now. They would have to fight. A fleet of warships was hastily assembled to defend Earth and its colonies. Ships roared into the skies, ready to face an enemy they barely understood. On the front lines of this battle was Captain Reyna Cole, a woman known for her stubborn courage and sharp tactical mind. She had seen countless battles, but this felt different. This wasn't just another alien skirmish. This was an invasion, one that would decide the future of humanity. It was aboard the Horizon Blade, one of Earth's most powerful ships, that Reyna would lead the charge against the Zalvaron. The ship's sleek, imposing form cut through the cold vacuum of space, its engines firing with the force of human determination. The crew of the Horizon Blade was ready to fight, but they were terrified. The Zalvaron had already destroyed so many other races. What hope did humanity have? But Reyna didn't share the fear. She stood on the bridge, staring at the star map projected before her. The Zalvaron were advancing quickly, their forces heading toward the mining planet Delta Varn. Earth had a choice: sit back and wait to be wiped out, or fight with everything they had. All hands, prepare for battle, Reyna commanded, her voice steady and clear. There was no turning back now. As the Horizon Blade approached Delta Varn, the battle raged on in the distance. Zalvaron ships, massive and terrifying, were already tearing through the planet's defenses. The humans didn't have time to waste. They had to act fast, or it would be too late. But something unexpected happened as they entered the heart of the battle. In the wreckage of a downed Zalvaron ship, they found something, or rather, someone, alive. It was a young alien girl, barely older than a teenager, floating in the wreckage. She was alone, unarmed, and seemingly helpless. Reyna's crew quickly took her aboard, unsure of what to do with her. The alien girl's appearance was strange. She had long silver hair that shimmered in the dim lights of the ship. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes glowed with a soft violet light. She was different from the typical Zalvaron soldiers, whose faces were cold and mechanical. This girl looked human in a way. When Reyna approached her, the alien girl raised her hand, a gesture that seemed to say she meant no harm. She spoke in a soft, strange language, and it took the ship's translator a moment to process her words. "I am Zurella," she said, her voice trembling but clear. Reyna didn't trust her, not yet. After all, this was a Zalvaron soldier, wasn't it? But something about the way the girl looked at her, the vulnerability in her glowing eyes, made Reyna hesitate. Zurella wasn't like the others. She didn't carry the same cold, calculating air. She was different. "I'm not like them," Zurella said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was made for war, but I chose to escape." Reyna looked at the girl, trying to understand what she meant. Escape? From who? Zorella's eyes flashed with a mixture of fear and defiance. From the Zalvaron Empire. I don't want to be part of their cleansing anymore. Reyna stared at the alien girl. It didn't make sense. How could a Zalvaron, made for war, raised for conquest, choose to turn her back on all that? But the desperation in Zorella's voice was enough to make Reyna believe her. I can help you, Zorella said. I know how to fight them. How to stop them. Reyna hesitated. Trusting an alien, especially one from the Zalvaron Empire, felt wrong. But if Zorella was telling the truth, this could be humanity's only chance to survive. I'm listening, Reyna said. And in that moment, Reyna realized that the battle ahead wouldn't be won with firepower alone. Humanity would need more than just weapons. They would need to outsmart the enemy, to fight with something deeper. They would need to fight with heart. Captain Reyna Cole stood on the bridge of the Horizon Blade, her eyes locked onto the swirling chaos outside the windows. The Zalvaran forces were ruthless, a tidal wave of destruction. The alien ships, massive and covered in dark, jagged metal, continued to bomb Delta Varn, and there was no sign of slowing. Earth's forces were outnumbered and outgunned. They had barely enough ships to make a dent in the Zalvaron fleet, and even then, the battle was going poorly. Reyna's mind raced, but her expression stayed calm, betraying none of the worry that gnawed at her insides. The decision to bring the alien girl aboard was still on her mind. She didn't know whether she could trust Zorella, but the girl had claimed to know how to defeat the Zalvaran. She wasn't like the rest of her species, she said. Zorella's words echoed in Reyna's head. I don't want to be part of the cleansing anymore. Could she believe her? Reyna didn't have time for second-guessing. The battle was growing more desperate by the minute. As if to prove the point, an explosion rocked the ship. The crew jumped, and Reyna quickly moved to the command console. Status? She demanded. One of the officers spoke quickly, his voice tight. We've lost communication with Delta Varn. The Zalvaran are too close. If we don't act now, we won't be able to stop them. The urgency was clear. Reyna's thoughts turned back to Zorella. The girl had said she could help them. She had. Something that could turn the tide of the battle. She wasn't sure what that was yet, but she needed to find out. With a deep breath, Reyna turned to her second-in-command, Commander Lucan, who stood by her side. Get me Zorella, she said, her voice sharp. Moments later, Zorella entered the bridge, her silver hair gleaming under the lights. She looked out of place among the humans. Her alien appearance, pale skin, glowing violet eyes, was enough to make anyone feel uneasy. But Reyna had to put her doubts aside. You said you could help us, Reyna said, trying to keep her voice steady. How? Zorella's eyes flickered, with uncertainty. But then she stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. I can help you understand their tactics. I know their strategies. The Zalvaran Empire is built on order, on their unshakable belief that only they have the right to rule the stars. They'll come at you with everything they have, and they'll never stop. But they have weaknesses. Their commanders, especially the one leading this assault, are all connected through a network. If you can break their communications, you'll cause confusion. That's when you strike. Reyna narrowed her eyes, trying to absorb what Zorella was saying. You think we can take down their entire fleet by attacking their communications? Zorella nodded. Yes, they're strong, but they're not invincible. They rely too heavily on their machines and their systems. If you can create enough chaos among their ranks, you'll force them to retreat. It's the only way to win. Reyna felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. It was a risky plan, but they didn't have any other options. We don't have much time, she said, turning to Lucan. Prepare a strike team. We're going after their communication relay. The crew moved quickly, the usual hum of the ship replaced by a rush of frantic commands. The Horizon Blade began to adjust course, heading toward the heart of the Zalvaron fleet. Zorella's plan had one major flaw, though. The Zalvaron didn't let their technology out of their sight. If they tried to breach their defenses, they would be met with heavy resistance. The human fleet was already struggling, and losing any more ships would guarantee failure. But Zorella had insisted on one thing. The only way to stop the Zalvaron was to use their own weakness against them. As the Horizon Blade neared the heart of the enemy forces, Reyna gathered her crew in the strategy room. Zorella was there as well, her face tense but determined. "This is it," Reyna said, her voice steady. "We have one chance to make this work. We hit the Zalvaron communication relay and we disrupt their entire fleet. If we fail, this will be our last mission. We have to succeed." The room was silent for a moment. Then, one by one, the crew nodded, their resolve solidifying. They knew the risks, but they also knew the stakes. Zorella had shown them a way to fight back, and they weren't about to give up now. The ship lurched forward as they entered the heart of the battle, ready to face the full force of the Zalvaron Empire. Reyna looked at her crew, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. There was no turning back. The fight had just begun. The Horizon Blade darted through the chaos of the battle, its sleek body cutting through the debris of destroyed ships as it made its way toward the heart of the Zalvaron fleet. The stars around them were a blur of flashing lights, explosions, and the fiery trails of missiles. Earth's fleet, despite their bravery, was struggling to hold their ground against the might of the Zalvaron Empire. Every moment was a battle for survival, and yet, Reyna Cole felt an odd sense of clarity in the chaos. Zorella's plan had given her hope, a plan that could turn the tide if they could reach the communication relay in time. As they neared the enemy's stronghold, the human fleet scattered, trying to avoid the overwhelming firepower of the Zalvaron ships. Their smaller, more nimble ships darted and weaved, taking shots from the massive Zalvaron warships that towered over them like giants. Reyna watched the readouts closely. Every second mattered. "We're almost there," Lucan said, standing beside her. His voice was tense but determined. "We've got Zalvaron ships closing in on our position." Reyna nodded. "Keep evasive maneuvers. Don't let them lock on to us." The ship jerked violently as another wave of fire hit the shields, but they held strong. Reyna's mind raced. They were close to the relay now, and with every passing second, the risk grew. They would have to fight through Zalvaron defenses to plant the disruptor charges on their communication hub. If they failed, the Zalvaron would be able to call in reinforcements, and Earth would lose everything. Zorella stood beside Reyna, her alien eyes scanning the battle outside with a cold intensity. "They're not expecting this," Zorella said. "The communication hub is protected, but it's vulnerable. If you hit it at the right angle, you'll knock out their entire fleet's ability to coordinate." Reyna took a deep breath. "You're sure?" Zorella's eyes met hers, unwavering. "This is our only chance." The Horizon Blade's engines roared as it pushed forward, darting through the enemy fire, every blast narrowly missing its mark. The crew worked in perfect unison, their focus unshakable as they continued to dodge the Zalvaron fleet's deadly attacks. The tension on the bridge was thick, but Reyna didn't falter. As they neared the communication relay, the Zalvaron ship, defenses activated. Waves of laser fire erupted from the massive alien vessels, slicing through space. But Reyna's ship dodged with expert precision. The Zalvaron had underestimated humanity's speed and agility. The Horizon Blade was faster than any ship they had faced before. "Get ready," Reyna called to her crew. "We're going in." The ship swooped down toward the communication hub, its sleek form gliding silently through space as it approached the heart of the enemy fleet. It was a delicate maneuver. One wrong move, and they would be obliterated by the sheer firepower of the Zalvaron warships. They could see the communication relay now, a massive structure suspended in space, surrounded by a swarm of smaller Zalvaron ships. This was it, their one shot. "Evasive action now!" Reyna shouted as a burst of energy from a nearby Zalvaron cruiser narrowly missed them. The horizon blade twisted and turned, narrowly avoiding a deadly barrage of laser fire. The crew held their breath, the ships shaking violent with every near miss. They were close now, so close that Reyna could see the faint shimmer of the communication relay's shield. "We need to plant the disruptors, now!" Lucan ordered, his voice steady even under the pressure. As the ship finally closed in, the strike team, led by Reyna herself, prepared to launch into the fray. Zurella's plan depended on them getting into the relay's core, planting the disruptor charges, and making it out alive. It was a suicide mission, but they didn't have any other choice. The team leapt into action, donning their suits, their faces set with determination. They would have to board the relay and plant the charges manually, disabling the entire Zalvaron fleet's ability to communicate. The countdown was on. Reyna took a deep breath and nodded to Zurella. "We're going in." They prepared to board. The enemy relay, their mission clear: destroy the Zalvaron's communication, and with it, their power. The moment they landed on the relay, the silence of space turned into a blur of motion and violence. The Zalvaron had detected them. They were already under attack. Weapons fire rang out as they fought their way through the alien defenses, moving quickly and precisely. The team's movements were swift, coordinated, but they knew they didn't have long. Reyna's heart pounded in her chest as she planted the disruptor charge at the core of the relay. The device was set to send out a massive pulse, scrambling all of the Zalvaron's communications and throwing their fleet into disarray. But even as she set the timer, the alarms blared, signaling that the relay was aware of their presence. The Zalvaron were coming. "Hurry up!" Lucan shouted, his voice urgent. The tension was unbearable. Reyna's mind raced as she glanced at the timer. Less than a minute left. The entire team was on edge, their weapons raised, watching every movement. As the Zalvaron advanced, the fate of humanity rested in their hands. The countdown on Reyna's wrist began to tick faster, each second feeling like an eternity. The disruptor charge was planted, but the Zalvaron were closing in on their position. The enemy had responded quickly to the human intrusion, and the relay's defenses were now fully activated. The crew, fighting for their lives, knew that if they didn't get out of there quickly, their mission would be a failure. Reyna's hands were steady, but her heart raced as the countdown continued. The Zalvaron were ruthless, and they wouldn't let the humans escape easily. As she glanced around at the strike team, Reyna could see their resolve, their faces set, with determination. But there was no mistaking the fear in their eyes. They were in the heart of enemy territory, and the odds of survival were slim. Zurella stood beside her, her alien eyes glowing as she observed the advancing Zalvaron. The tension between them was palpable. Despite the human force's best efforts, they were still facing overwhelming odds. But Zurella had promised that they could defeat the Zalvaron if they succeeded in their mission, and Reyna had to believe in her. "We need to move now!" Lucan barked, his voice tight with urgency. The team swiftly began to retreat toward the ship's escape hatch, but the Zalvaron were relentless. As they sprinted through the corridors of the relay, explosions erupted around them. The walls shook with the force of the blasts, but the team pressed on. Reyna's pulse was pounding in her ears, but she focused on the task at hand. They couldn't afford to lose now. "We're almost there," Lucan said, his voice strained. The escape was within reach, but the Zalvaron had managed to trap them. More troops emerged from the shadows, weapons raised, and Reyna's team was forced to fight their way through. Every shot from the Zalvaron was deadly, but the humans fought with an intensity that only desperation could fuel. They knew they had one shot, and they couldn't let it slip away. Reyna felt a surge of adrenaline as she fired at a group of Zalvaron soldiers, her aim precise. Her strike team followed suit, their weapons cutting down the enemy with deadly efficiency. But there were too many of them. As the last of the Zalvaron forces seemed to be retreating, a heavy explosion rocked the station, sending Reyna crashing to the floor. The ship's shields had finally failed, and they were losing everything. Lucan reached down, pulling her to her feet. "We've got to move," he shouted. As they reached the escape hatch, a new wave of Zalvaron reinforcements arrived, cutting off their path. Reyna's heart dropped. They were trapped. The team had no choice but to make a desperate last stand. Zurella moved forward, her eyes narrowing as she analyzed the situation. "We can't fight them all," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But we can buy time for the others." Reyna understood what she meant. They would have to fight and hold the line while the Horizon Blade made its way to them. There was no other way. The team gathered together, their backs against the wall, as the Zalvaron soldiers advanced. Reyna's mind raced, trying to think of a way out. But the truth was, they had no options left. It would all come down to this moment. As the Zalvaron approached, their weapons raised, Reyna knew they couldn't allow the relay's destruction to be in vain. They would stand and fight. Together, they fired their weapons, cutting down the incoming enemies one by one. But the Zalvaron kept coming, and their numbers seemed endless. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, the Horizon Blade emerged from the chaos. The ship was heavily damaged, but it was still flying. Reyna saw the glowing beacon of its escape, pods in the distance. They had made it. The ship's last effort had bought them enough time. With a final push, Reyna and her team sprinted for the escape pods, leaving the relay behind. The blast from the disruptor had already begun to ripple through the Zalvaron communications, and the fleet was in disarray. The Zalvaron had lost their connection, and for the first time in the battle, humanity had a chance to win. As Reyna and her team boarded the pods, they could see the Horizon Blade struggling to stay in the air. Its engines were sputtering, but it was still fighting. The Zalvaron, unable to regroup, had begun to retreat. Reyna felt a sense of relief wash over her. They had done it. The battle was far from over, but humanity had struck a powerful blow. As the pods ejected from the ship, the crew watched from the windows as the Horizon Blade made its final stand against the retreating Zalvaron forces. Reyna's eyes were locked on the ship, a fierce pride swelling in her chest. They had done the impossible. Together, they had held their ground, and humanity had proven that it would never back down in the face of overwhelming odds. The Zalvaron may have been powerful, but they had underestimated humanity's will to survive. The journey was far from over, but Reyna knew one thing for sure. They weren't going to give up now. Not when they had everything to fight for. The situation had changed drastically. The once unified and powerful Zalvaron fleet was now in chaos, their command structure shattered. The disruptor charge planted by Reyna and her team had successfully crippled their communication network, causing confusion and disorder among their ranks. However, this was not the end of the battle. Humanity had won a crucial moment, but the war was far from over. The Zalvaron, despite their sudden disarray, still had the power to strike back with immense force. Earth's fleet, though battle-hardened, had suffered severe damage. Their remaining ships were scattered, and many were limping away from the battlefield. Reyna and her team, now safely aboard their escape pods, watched helplessly as the Horizon Blade, their last hope, continued to fight against the odds. Its damaged hull was glowing with the heat of battle, but it kept pushing forward, defying the might of the Zalvaron. In the distance, the pods carrying Reyna's crew, along with the survivors from the Horizon Blade, were hurtling toward the safety of the nearby human station, the only haven left amidst the vast expanse of space. But even there, the tension was palpable. They couldn't rest yet. Their victory had bought them time, but time alone was not enough. The Zalvaron were regrouping, preparing for a counterattack, and Earth's fleet was too scattered to mount another immediate offensive. As Reyna's escape pod touched down on the station's surface, she couldn't shake the feeling that the fight wasn't over, that this momentary victory would only set the stage for an even greater struggle ahead. Inside the station, the crew regrouped, and their commander, Captain Mendez, immediately called for a meeting. Reyna joined the team, still shaken from the battle, but determined to push forward. They had faced the might of the Zalvaron and survived, but now it was time to plan their next move. "We've got one shot," Captain Mendez said, looking around at the gathered crew. "The Zalvaron are down, but they're not out. We need to act fast, or they'll regroup and hit us harder than before." Reyna nodded. The commander was right. If the Zalvaron reorganized, the fragile advantage they had gained could slip away in a heartbeat. They needed to strike, and they needed to strike now. But Reyna was no strategist, and her mind was focused more on survival than tactics. She felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her, but Zarella stepped forward with a calm that reassured her. "The Zalvaron are not used to losing," Zarella said, her alien eyes scanning the room. "But they've underestimated you. Humans have fought with heart, something they cannot understand." Reyna's heart skipped a beat. Zarella was right. The Zalvaron might have superior technology and overwhelming firepower, but they lacked the one thing that humans had in abundance: the drive to never give up, no matter the odds. "We need to take the fight to them," Zarella continued. "We'll use their own tactics against them, disorienting them, exploiting their weaknesses." Reyna's thoughts were racing, but a plan began to form. If they could lure the Zalvaron into a trap, they might be able to destroy their remaining forces and buy enough time for a more decisive blow. But there was a catch. They needed to get close, dangerously close, to the heart of the Zalvaron fleet. The risk was enormous. One wrong move, and the humans could lose everything. Captain Mendez was quick to approve the plan, and Reyna's team, now reinforced with a small group of elite soldiers, prepared for the next phase of the mission. The stakes had never been higher. With the remaining human ships still repairing, Reyna's team would have to board an enemy vessel and plant a series of sabotage devices. The goal was to cripple the Zalvaron flagship. If they could destroy the command ship, the entire fleet would lose its ability to function cohesively. But that was easier said than done. The flagship was surrounded by dozens of smaller Zalvaron vessels, all ready to strike down anything that came too close. The humans had no choice but to rely on their skills and agility to evade the Zalvaron's watchful eyes. As Reyna, Zarella, and the rest of the team geared up for their next mission, the uncertainty of the coming days loomed large. They couldn't afford to hesitate. But the knowledge that they were about to go deep into enemy territory weighed heavily on their minds. The stakes had reached their highest point. This would either be humanity's greatest victory or their final defeat. Despite the fear and the pressure, Reyna knew one thing for sure. They would fight until their last breath. They had come this far, and they wouldn't let the Zalvaron win. Together, they would face whatever came next, and whatever it took. They would prove to the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. The final phase of the mission had begun, and Reyna's heart raced as her team prepared to board the Zalvaron flagship. This was the most dangerous part of their plan, the one that could determine the outcome of the war. With the Zalvaron still reeling from their recent defeat, now was their chance to strike. If they could destroy the flagship, the Zalvaron fleet would be left without a leader, without coordination, and it would crumble. But getting to the flagship wouldn't be easy. The Zalvaran were vicious and would defend their command ship with everything they had. Reyna and her team had no choice but to rely on their wits, their training, and the element of surprise. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the flagship, plant the sabotage devices, and get out. No one had the luxury of thinking about what would happen if they failed. The risks were too high. The space around them was dark, and the Zalvaran fleet loomed like a deadly predator. Their ship, cloaked in stealth technology, moved silently through the void, but Reyna knew they couldn't hide forever. Every moment brought them closer to the flagship, and every second counted. When they finally made their approach, the tension was unbearable. Reyna's team, with their weapons primed and hearts heavy with determination, prepared to board the enemy vessel. The plan was simple: infiltrate the flagship through its weak points, plant the devices, and escape before they could be caught. But nothing about facing an enemy this powerful was ever simple. As they made their way inside, Reyna felt a mixture of adrenaline and fear surge through her. The halls of the flagship were cold and silent, but that only made it more terrifying. They moved quickly, navigating through the dark corridors, their footsteps muffled by the ship's vast size. The deeper they went, the more they realized just how powerful the Zalvaran really were. Every corner seemed to hide a threat. Every hallway could be the last they ever walked down. But there was no turning back. Zurella, the alien ally who had fought alongside them since the beginning, moved with grace and precision, guiding them through the labyrinthine halls. Her alien senses were a valuable asset, helping the team avoid patrols and traps set by the Zalvaran. Despite her calm demeanor, Reyna could sense the quiet tension in Zurella's movements. Even the most skilled warriors could feel the weight of the odds stacked against them. Their goal was a central control room where the Zalvaran leadership would be, and it was heavily guarded. As they approached the room, the sounds of alien voices echoed in the distance. The team knew they had to move quickly. They couldn't risk being discovered. They reached the control room doors, and Reyna's hands shook as she planted the final sabotage device. The countdown began. It was now or never. They had minutes to escape. With their mission almost complete, the alarm suddenly blared. The Zalvaran had detected them. There was no time to waste. Reyna's team sprinted back the way they came, but the path was no longer clear. Zalvaran soldiers flooded the corridors, weapons raised, determined to stop them. The humans fought back with everything they had, using their weapons and their tactics to outmaneuver the alien soldiers. But the Zalvaran were relentless, and Reyna's team was running out of time. The countdown was nearing its final seconds. As the fight escalated, Zurella pushed forward, clearing the path for the others. "Go! I'll hold them off!" she shouted, her voice firm. Reyna hesitated, but Zurella's command was clear. They couldn't afford to lose anyone now. Reluctantly, Reyna turned and ran, her team following closely behind. They reached their escape pods, barely managing to break free from the flagship as explosions erupted around them. The flagship was starting to break apart. The sabotage devices had done their job. Reyna's chest tightened as she watched the explosion rip through the flagship, sending a shockwave through space. The Zalvaran had lost their command ship, and with it, their ability to coordinate. Their fleet was in disarray, but the victory felt hollow. They had lost so much in the process. Zurella's sacrifice was a reminder of how high the cost of war could be. As Reyna's escape pod drifted toward the safety of the nearby station, she looked out into the vastness of space, knowing that their fight wasn't over. The Zalvaran would regroup, but humanity had struck a decisive blow. They had shown the galaxy that no matter how powerful their enemies were, they would never back down. The battle was far from won, but for the first time in a long while, Reyna felt hope. Humanity had faced the impossible and emerged victorious. The Zalvaron may have thought they could crush humanity, but they had underestimated them. They had underestimated the strength of the human spirit. Reyna knew that as long as humans had each other, they would keep fighting, no matter the cost.